Well, the Philadelphia Eagles dropped the ball literally in their 36-33 loss to the Washington Commanders. The Locked On Eagles postgame show coming your way.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into the Locked On Eagles postgame show. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch each and every day. We are brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. 36-33, the Eagles finally lose a game for the first time since week 4 in Tampa Bay, this time to the Washington Commanders, 36-33. The Eagles now 12-3. Just a roller coaster ride of a game. Jalen Hurts gets knocked out early in this one. Jaden Daniels gets the go-ahead touchdown with 10 seconds to go. There pretty much goes the 1 seed Gino, but at the same time, I don't want to be the moral victory guy, but it took so much for the Commanders to beat this Eagles team that had Kenny Pickett in the game. So, yes, it sucks the Eagles will probably not have home field advantage throughout the entire NFC playoffs. But if this is the matchup again, Eagles-Commanders in the first round, I welcome it.
More than likely is going to be exactly that, man. And Jaden Daniels, hats off to him.
Off to him. He's a baller,
interceptions
for sure.
on the day. He said, all right, I'll throw 5 touchdowns. Very uncharacteristic from the defensive perspective. It felt very reminiscent to that Buccaneers game where a lot of the times early on, Lou, you see Slay get beat in a one-on-one situation in man. You see Q get beat in a one-on-one situation in man. All of a sudden, Chauncey's not in the game. And then they're just playing a ton of off coverage and zone. And Jaden Daniels did a fantastic job of just picking them apart. The toughest thing is Kellen Moore, in my opinion, man. Like, I knew you're in a tough spot once Jalen goes out of this game. He is, without a doubt, the guy you need moving forward. This isn't going to be a Nick Foles situation. Like, let's get that for certain.
But that's the reality of pretty much every team in the NFL, right, Gino? So
without a doubt, man. But can't cry when guys get injured. It's got to be the next man up. And there were plenty of situations right before half, Lou. You get the ball in plus territory, and you walk away with 0 points because Jake Elliott fails to get that field goal.
Right.
You had plenty of time to go and get 6, and you were just not putting together a good game plan at the time. Washington figured out, hey, Kenny Pickett can't really throw the ball, and Saquon Barkley is the only guy that's going to make a difference. If we key on him, after that long explosive run, they did a good job of keeping him at bay. They had their chances. They shot themselves in the foot multiple times. Washington did a really good job in a game that felt like World War I trench warfare. Like you were just rock fight
the rivalry's
in the second
back.
half. It feels good that the NFC is going to keep you on the NFC East at least is going to keep you on your toes. Jaden Daniels is a baller, and you got to worry about them in the first round more than likely.
It's going to happen. It's going to be round 3
The thing that goes out the
sure.
window is the 1 seed, but the biggest concern right now is health. You need Jalen Hurts to be healthy. You need Jordan Davis to be healthy.
Josh Sweat
needs to be healthy. He came back into that game, but they have to be healthy, man. You don't go anywhere without your quarterback. But 21 points in the first half, Lou.
But that's why I want to make the
enough
case
to win that game. It's tough. Like
I know.
It's not when you're going to be mad at, more frustrated that you couldn't get it because you know that now the 1 seed kind of is out of the equation.
That's not why I'm not nervous about the matchup. You know what I mean? Why if this
they
is
were
the game
moving the
again,
ball with ease in the beginning of the game, dude. Ease.
That's my thing is like I want to give credit to Jaden Daniels, like you said. I mean, he was unbelievable, especially in the second half.
Player, man.
I mean, just completely picking apart what was an uncharacteristically soft game plan from Vic Fangio. You mentioned how it was kind of similar to that Buccaneers game. I thought it was very similar, too, to the Falcons game week 2, where that final drive went the exact same way. They drove down with ease, and it felt like they just didn't have Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, or Darius Slay challenge these receivers at all, right? And so, again, I want to give the Commanders credit. Like, they showed they could play with the Eagles, and if this is a postseason game, Jaden Daniels can beat you. I mean, that's a big-time player. But it took Jalen Hurts going down, which I think was a cheap shot, by the way. I think the Commanders had a lot of dirty plays today that were not called, and yet the Eagles are getting called for unnecessary roughness calls and unsportsmanlike plays when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's getting hit in the face. It took bad calls from referees. It took uncharacteristic drops. I mean, that's why it was very similar to the Falcons game, too. Devontae Smith with a drop that would have ended the game, right? So in that situation, it's just like Saquon week 2. Saquon had a bad drop on a wheel route. It took that, and it took 30-plus points against Kenny Pickett to still beat the Eagles. So I'm still confident that, it sucks the 1 seed's gone, but if this is the matchup again, I still think the Eagles should be favored. But it's cool that it's kind of a dogfight in this division now. Like, this is going to be a rock fight in the first round. I think this is going to be the matchup we get again.
It's absolutely going to be, because you look at the NFC West right now, it looks like it's going to be the Rams, and unless the Seahawks continue to push the pace, which I'm sure they were not fans of the Eagles losing this game today because they have a chance at the wild card spot as well, but it really does look like the game that you are going to get, and it's not going to be an easy one, Lou. Once Washington really honed in on stopping the run, they did a really good job. They were a pain in the receiving game. But there were enough plays to be made in this game where you saw it in the first game against Washington. You saw it today even with Kenny Pickett in the game. I mean, there were some huge fourth down plays from everybody on the offense on that last drive. You don't even get to the Devontae Smith situation on that last drop, which law of averages, eventually everybody is going to have a drop in their career.
I was going to say, man, he makes that catch. Someone even said in our comments 99% of the time.
As somebody who's superstitious, I keep my Italian horn on me to protect me from the malocchio, which is somebody can look at you the wrong way, and somebody looked at Devontae Smith the wrong way today, and he dropped that ball. Saquon dropped that ball. Kenny Pickett, there were some situations, too, on a couple A.J. Brown throws, which were behind him, where it's like, if Jalen's there, you probably get the ball out in front. They don't make a play on it.
That's why I don't want to blame these guys a lot.
Frustrating little things that could have gone your way. You get 5 turnovers. Like, how can you be mad at the defense
but that's
getting
the
the
thing
ball
too.
5 times?
I mean, they had 5 turnovers, and they forced a fourth down stop in the first quarter, Gino. So 6 times they flipped the field on defense, and yet the Commanders still won. Like, that normally... If that's what happens, the Eagles are going to win that football game. And there were so many uncharacteristic is the right word, uncharacteristic things in this game that hurt the Eagles, like that impacted them negatively, that I just don't think will happen week after week. Like Quinyon Mitchell getting beat deep. Like that was rare today. Darius Slay got beat deep as well. They normally don't tackle that poorly. In the second half, I don't know if just the defense ran out of juice, but it took a lot for the Commanders to beat this football team. So I think... I don't like ever using the moral victory word ever in the NFL, but in today's game, as frustrating as that loss was, because they still should have had it with everything that happened, the chaos of this football game, it still is like, it's hard to be super mad about. I think this was a one-off for sure.
The season really comes down to the reason you don't have the 1 seed, and it looks like it's probably all wrapped up at this point, and you'll probably see, unless something crazy happens, Kenny Pickett at least for one more game down the stretch, I would believe, after this, Lou, where...
He'll probably play against the Cowboys.
Are you really concerned about the NFC North and the West catching up to you right now? You have the tiebreaker over the Rams. You're probably going to play Washington regardless at this point. Health is really what it comes down to. They need Jalen Hurts to be back. Even though Jalen Hurts wasn't looking great in the passing game early on, he looked explosive as a runner. Saquon Barkley,
they were cooking.
That 1-2 punch with those two guys. Saquon goes for over 100 yards in the first quarter. They score on the first drive of the game for the first time all season long. It's completely different from the Falcons game where you didn't know what was going to come after that. You just won 10 games. You know that it took everything from Washington. And good on them, man. They could have rolled over and died when things were just not going their way. And they got a quarterback now that you're going to have to worry about. And it's going to be tough to beat this team in the playoffs. But if you're fully healthy and you thought the next man up was going to work after this week where we said the depth was going to have to come up big, defense was tested depth-wise. And Fangio, Kellen Moore, I think those guys could have done a better job to put them in a good situation and to potentially win this football game. But we're really, I mean, you're picking at straws, like picking hairs here. Like it's tough. You just scored 33 points in a game where Kenny Pickett was in it for over 80%.
I don't want to make a big
game.
picture statement about this loss.
I don't think it
I don't
is.
know.
This is a kaleidoscope game where you just got to look at it in this one lens.
Yes, I totally agree. It's a vacuum. This is not the Tampa game where we should make any giant declarations. And I think that's kind of the main point of this game. 36-33, the final score. These two teams likely to play again in the postseason. The Eagles drop to 12-3. We'll continue to recap the game coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles postgame show.
This episode of LOE is brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they are giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out, and you could get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. If you picked Jaden Daniels to have more than his touchdown total, and you pick Saquon Barkley to have more than his yardage total, well, you were going to be a big winner over at Prize Picks. And if you still want to get in on the action for the rest of these Sunday games, Monday Night Football, the Christmas games, download the Prize Pick app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Prize Picks, run your game.
Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen and watch each and every day. It's the post-game show, 36-33. The final score in a roller coaster matchup against the Washington Commanders. The Eagles dropped to 12-3. And there goes the 1 seed, which is unfortunate. Again, it sucks that you're 12-3, and yet you're going to be a team that almost has to play a really good quarterback in round 1. Like, that's frustrating, but that's just
the NFC, man.
That's the way it's gone this year. Yeah,
it's a good conference right now.
Yeah,
a lot of good teams.
So that's unfortunate. And again, there were a lot of issues today where the Eagles shot themselves in the foot. Right, drops. I think lapses in coverage, like you said. I think the coordinators didn't do a good enough job elevating when guys were dropping on both sides of the ball because of injuries. So there was a lot of things. Special teams was not good today. I thought, Jalen Carter and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they were undisciplined, right? CGJ got kicked out of this game for those 2 penalties.
Yeah, that was tough, man. You can't do that.
You can't do that. But I will say again, as we mentioned at the end of segment 1, I don't want to make some grand gesture like this huge statement about this game tells us about this Philadelphia Eagles football team, because everything that I just laid out was so uncharacteristic. And again, when Jalen Hurts isn't in this football game because he gets taken out, which again, a hit that I thought was not clean, you still almost won on the road against a really good quarterback. So yeah, I'm not hitting the panic button at all. Again, the 1 seed, it sucks because if they were the 1 seed, I'm saying they're going to New Orleans because nobody's coming into Philly and beating this football team. But I'm still pretty confident, all things considered.
Having to play Washington this many times in a month, it's going to be physical one, man.
Yeah.
Dallas is going to give you their best shot next week. The Giants are going to give their best shot at the end of the season there too. I'm sure in this situation now, as I prefaced in segment 1, they're more than likely in rest mode going forward, because if you look at the numbers, and I'm sure some things will change as these afternoon and evening games wrap up, that the Eagles more than likely are going to see this Washington team again. They're going to solidify the 2 seed, and Washington's probably going to get the 7 seed.
Yeah.
They're going to host at least 2 if you get by Washington. And how do you do that? You got to get healthy, and it's quarterback 1. And if you ever want to say that any quarterback can just come into this offense and just prosper.
No, Jalen Hurts showed his value today. Well, that's the thing is, Gene, I think we've been spoiled in our entire life as an Eagles fan and now analyst of they've had so many backup quarterbacks that have taken you on miraculous runs. Heck, one even won you a championship. So I think there's a standard in Philadelphia for backup quarterbacks. But I think we've learned over the last few years with Gardner Minshew and Kenny Pickett that this is a reality also in the NFL. Like when you lose your franchise quarterback, it's going to take a lot to win football games. And Kenny Pickett today, I thought he was fine, but you could see the difference in accuracy with the
Without
way
a
he
doubt.
held onto the football, the lack of explosiveness as a runner. I mean, it's night and day compared to Jalen Hurts. So I think the Eagles saw this is the reality in the NFL right now. And I will say I think the rest of the team, though, all things considered, for most of the game, did step up and they had to do more. Like the defense, you got to give them credit for flipping the field 6 times. But I really just think they ran out of gas at the end.
They were on the field a lot, dude.
A lot.
The offense needed to close out the game there at the end, and they were just on the field, and then all of a sudden they're back on the field. But that was a shootout game, and we talked about the conditioning and having the depth. This is one where those guys had to step up, and Washington, they were able to do that. Those guys continued to make play after play after play, and it took till the last whistle to beat this Philadelphia Eagles team, Lou. And outside of the Tampa Bay game, 2 of your losses are by 1 score.
In one drop.
Games that
by
came
one
down
drop.
to a drop. Exactly. That's the NFL. It's margins. It's good to great. I haven't used that in a while, but that's one of those things that even if Washington, for the first time in NFL history, wins in a game where they turn the ball over 5 times, that's just tough. But hey, that's one of those anomalies, right? That hopefully will never happen again. And I was frustrated, I will say this, in the Saquon Barkley sprint right, one route option to Devontae Smith. I think Kellen Moore...
Did he just not trust Pickett to do, he needed to keep it simple?
Dude, in the red zone, we got to have creativity. We got to have some ideas, and that was the best we were coming up with in that situation. I know the game plan isn't to have Kenny in there, but red zone plays are red zone plays, right, to an extent. And yes, you have Jalen with that draw ability, but woof, there were some times I was questioning Kellen Moore. I don't want to make any stamps on this season though from this game, because 80% of it was without your quarterback, and
80% of it just normally doesn't happen with this football team. You're seeing Zach Bond just look lost in zone coverage, passing guys off to nobody. I think it really was just an exhaustion thing. I mean, Zach Bond had 2 forced turnovers today, 2 forced fumbles. So I actually thought before that he was having a great game plan, or game in general. Again, Darius Slay had a really good game, and then it just felt like at the end he was exhausted. And Quinyon Mitchell as well. And the defensive line, they just weren't getting pressure on Jaden Daniels. And he was just picking apart, there were just holes in the zone coverage, and they didn't get there in time. So I think, is there anything that you saw in this game where you're against Jaden Daniels specifically, that they have to correct the most if they play them again in the playoffs?
The 4th and 11 play, I think, really boils down what they needed to focus on. And if you see that 4th and 11 play, it parts like the Red Sea. And why is that? Well, it's 4th and 11, and as a defensive lineman, you want to get to the quarterback, certainly so. But you have to have rush lane integrity, because the second you either get even with Daniels or behind him, which 3 out of the 4 pass rushers were at that point, he's gone. We have to know the situation there. And as smart as the Eagles defense is, and they were so good at keying plays throughout this game. The screen game was not working for Washington at all. They were able to take away the run for the most part. They were so ahead of the game, and just one area where it lapsed was Jaden Daniels picking up big downs with his legs. Maybe we could have spied him at times. I don't know. I'm not a defensive coordinator, but that was the one thing where he's a good player, man. He is a game changer, and he, unlike the Daniel Jones selection from the Giants, is somebody you're going to have to worry about. And now there are 3 teams in the NFC East that have legitimate quarterbacks. So.
Eagles got a taste of their own medicine, Gino. This is what Jalen Hurts does. There's plays that break down, and you think you've won that play. And normally against a lot of quarterbacks in this league, like a Jared Goff type, you would have won it. But Jaden Daniels, you're right. You just got to tip your cap as well. He's a special talent, and you have to be you got to keep your eyes up and know where he is at all times, because the play is not over if you get initial pressure. If you get in the backfield, it's not over. You have to finish.
Especially against a guy like that, dude.
That's the one thing I'd say this defense this year has struggled with. And most defenses do, playing against elite mobile quarterbacks. But you look at the game against Joe Burrow, against Lamar Jackson, against Jaden Daniels as well. In this one, since he was a lot healthier than last time, I think they've definitely struggled to finish in that way. So maybe you're right. Maybe you try a spy. You got to play zone coverage a lot against these players because you don't want your back turned to them. But there's definitely some adjustment you got to make because that second half, he was just locked in. He was getting whatever he wanted.
He was lethal. And you know what thought ran through my head there during the game? I'm thinking about, I know you don't want to think ahead, but I was thinking about in February, like the game neither you nor I want to see.
Yeah.
If it is against Buffalo, how are you going to stop Josh?
No, it's a good point.
How are you, like, in the NFC, man, maybe you play Jordan Love again. Like, maybe you're playing another mobile quarterback that isn't Jared Goff. Sam Darnold even has a little bit of juice in his legs. And Matt Stafford ran against you, for goodness sake, for a nice little scamper. So when you're playing these elite athletes, those little things, the rush lane integrity, that has to be there. It's just a tough one. It really is. It's not one that I'm going to flip my lid about. You'll go back and see some good plays. You'll see some bad things.
Yeah.
But Washington, they're paid to make plays too, and that's not a Washington of old. That is for certain.
We'll get into the positives as we recap the Locked On Eagles postgame show. 36-33 is the final. The Eagles have fallen for the first time since week 4 to the Commanders, 12-3. We'll finish things up right here on Locked On Eagles coming up next. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, like big time with anytime A.J. Brown TDs, Devontae Smith, of course, Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. Like if you want that $5 bet to hit, just take Hurts or Saquon. There's so many things you can bet on through FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your chance again at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, recapping a 36-33 loss for the Philadelphia Eagles, this time in D.C. against the Washington Commanders, and there will likely be a round 3 if things go the way we project in the first round of the playoffs. The Eagles, if they win the division, which they will, they're going to be locked in at that 2 seed. So I do think, again, this wasn't like a damn, like you're going to have to play this team again, and I think the Commanders can beat you kind of thing. Like, yeah, of course with Jaden Daniels, he did show today. Yeah, it's not going to be it's not going to be a cakewalk like 2022 when you play Daniel Jones in the divisional round.
Completely different.
Yeah, Daniels definitely showed that. But this game didn't show me, even with Washington winning, things that I'm like, oh no, like I'm scared to play the Commanders. Still, they're, with the Rams and Tampa Bay and even Minnesota to a degree, all those NFC teams are kind of in this tier where if you didn't get the bye, the reality of the conference this year is there's a lot of really solid football teams that if you had to play in the first round, no matter what, it wasn't going to be an easy out. But you still almost pulled this off considering so many bad things went their way and uncharacteristic things that impacted you negatively. So I still, this isn't a game that's making me feel discouraged if they have to play the Commanders again. If anything, there are some things you can take that you're encouraged about around 3.
I wouldn't say that there's nothing that Washington does that I'm worried about. I think Frankie Louvu,
and that's not what I meant.
Talk about how good Zach Bond has been at linebacker. Louvu's He's a good player, man. And say what you want about the Hurts hit. I mean, it is what it is. The refs didn't call anything, whatever. But they have a defense that flies around. And they have the guys that we've said for a couple of years, man, that are going to be problems. And you bring Lattimore into the equation as well. It's a fun matchup with him and AJ. I like that move.
I do think he got cooked, though, for most of that game. I mean,
AJ, he won a lot of those one-on-ones today for sure. Jalen Carter had some moments where he just looked like a freak, dude. Like that forced fumble was unbelievable right out of the gate. And Reed Blankenship is flying around again on the backside. And Cooper DeJean looked good for most of the game. And Quignon looked good for most of the game outside of a couple plays. And then you see Slay the same thing. There's not a lot to get discouraged by. It's just tighten up those little issues, like be a little bit more disciplined here. How can we be a little bit more creative in the red zone? How can we stop these end of the game situations where maybe we aren't as playing off as much and being defensive? Let's be a little bit more reactive. But at the same time, we got answers to some questions today. Could the Eagles score on the first drive of the game? Yeah, put up one of the best quarters we've seen in terms of first quarters.
That was
over
a big
the last
win today.
2 weeks. That was huge, and not just today, Lou, against Pittsburgh as well.
I think
To open
tempo's
up
a fix,
games, the
Gino.
defense is good. It's just not in the game plan to get Kenny Pickett in there, which is it's tough, man. He made some plays that it was like, oh, I didn't expect him to pick up those fourth downs, and he manipulated that one on the pump fake to get it to Devontae. That ball to Saquon, if he puts it out in front of him, it's probably a touchdown. But if number one is in there, it's going to be...
They win that game.
Dude, the series between Jalen and Jaden Daniels moving forward, that's something to take away from this. That's going to be fun.
I don't want to...
very fun.
I don't want to discredit the Commanders while also giving the Eagles some grace based on what happened in this football game.
You just won 10 games in a row.
Yeah.
Like, that didn't just all of a sudden not happen. The 2-2 reaction we had was, this is a team that's up and down, and you need to put your line in the sand before things get too bad. And they did. And they went on to win 10 games, and you lose this game by 3 points with your backup quarterback in there against the best Washington quarterback you've seen in the 21st century.
And that part is true. Daniel showed today that playoff game is going to be very fun for...
Dude, it's that environment in the Link will be very fun for an NFC East showdown.
It's going to be a dogfight for sure. This is not going to be one where they go in and just blow the doors off that football team. Like, they can play with the Eagles, and I think they showed the Commanders this year really haven't beaten a good team, but I think they showed today like they can do, if Jaden Daniels is on like that, they can beat anybody.
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm trying to like balance the credit the Commanders while also understand what the Eagles situation was today. So I still think the Eagles, you can make the argument, are the best team in the NFL, the best team in the NFC. Unfortunately, though, man, they're going to have to do this if they want to get to New Orleans. They're going to have to be the 2 seed and likely go on the road at least for one matchup in the NFC Championship.
Maybe, just maybe, looking at the positive side of this, you are able to rest the guys here down the stretch. You aren't getting that bye like we talked about. That
it's a silver lining, man, because they look tired and they were getting beat up today injury-wise, so that's important.
When you haven't had off since week 5, it is week 16. Contextualize that as well. And you still gave it a damn good fight, man. Like, that team didn't give up. Did this feel like the Drew Lock game last year? Did this feel like the Sam Howell game last year? In my opinion, no.
I don't even think it felt like. I think you made a good point earlier in the show. It was so similar how the game ended to the Falcons game, and there were things about this coverage-wise that was like, oh, no, that looks like the Tampa matchup. But like you said, there was an unknown because of the collapse of what you were going to get with this football team moving forward after those games. After a franchise record 10 straight wins, I'm not concerned that a 3-point loss where Devontae Smith drops a ball that would have ended the game is suddenly going to be a giant referendum on this football team. So I think before we end the show, like, that would be my main takeaway is the sky is not falling. And I know it's not sexy to not have a giant bold take after a game, but I really do think this is something you need to look at in a vacuum, this matchup.
Without a doubt, man. That's a really good way to look at it, because even in 2017, down the stretch there, you weren't perfect. You dropped some games that you were
2022, you were like, are we going to wrap up this 1 seed at any point? It took them the last game to do it. So
they've never been that team that just like walks into the playoffs without some sort of question. And I don't even think they have a ton of questions, because you know what the game plan is.
And again, if Jalen Hurts doesn't get hurt, they might be smoothly going into the playoffs. That's the huge thing, is they didn't have their quarterback.
Maybe you can rest him for 2 weeks now after this. It's not great to see him get the concussion too. It sucks because that was a perfect time to call the draw. Like, Kellen Moore is really on the ball calling that draw.
And he got down. Call. That's the annoying thing, is he was down on the ground when he got hit, and that's what annoys me the most.
Very reminiscent to the Wentz one against Seattle.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to say it.
I think that's why we kind of.
I think that's why I got
sour
mad
about this.
Yeah.
Bit.
No,
but
I agree. Look,
heads off to Washington, man. But
I don't like to be a ref guy, but
different.
I totally agree. I don't like to be a ref guy, but I do think that they let the Commanders get away with some things today they didn't let the Eagles get away with. So that was a part of it as well.
Bad overall.
But overall, it's going to
give us robots.
Yeah, it's going to be an intense matchup. Like, this was a aggressive, physical game against Washington, and I think that's what you're going to get in the first round. So the Eagles got to take care of business, though, clinch the division with one more win. They got the Cowboys next week, the Giants after that, hopefully Jalen Hurts, like, let's heal this concussion, just get back, like you said, get these guys healthy and rested before the postseason, and just focus on that and, getting the 2 seed. I still think that's, not a bad situation to be in. Remember, the NFL now, like, they took away 2 bye weeks. So unless you're one of 2 teams, you're going to likely have to go on the road to play a team at some point. And that's just to say, if the Lions get to the NFC title, I think that's looking ahead a little bit too much. You never know. The NFC, like this showed too, like the NFC is a good conference. I know all the main top tier quarterbacks are in the AFC, but there are a lot of like good complete teams in this conference. Like even like seeds 4 through 8. I mean, there's no pushovers. There's not I don't know. I guess the AFC is not really like that either. The playoffs, I think 1 through 7 this year, more than the last few years. There's not a team I'm like, oh, that's an easy out. You know what I mean? Like I think a 7, I think like a couple lower seeds could win games in the first round on both sides this year.
Some additional, positive news: if Minnesota continues to win, they will have a chance to play in that final game. And if Detroit were to slip up at any point, it would come down to home field advantage. And that would be a gauntlet game. Yeah. So maybe those teams continue to kick the crap out of each other too. And that's a little bit of a saving grace. But you're talking about a potential 15-win team being the 5 seed and 2 double-digit win teams being the 6 and 7. The NFC is tough, man. The NFC is, if you come out of the NFC this year, good on you. You deserve it. There are a ton of good teams. I think you hit it on the head, like the premier quarterbacks, the Allen, the Mahomes. Yeah, that's in the other conference, but these are some damn good teams, man. The Lions are good. Minnesota is can't say that they're not good at this point.
No, Green Bay is good.
All top 7 teams are good, and you still have to worry about Seattle as a potential sneak your way into the playoffs there. Yeah. So a lot to unfold. Really just comes down to number 1 getting healthy.
Yeah, just get Jalen Hurts healthy. Totally agree. 36-33, the final score. The Eagles lose in Washington to the Commanders. Now 12-3 on the year. Gino and I will continue to get into this matchup tomorrow with Stock Up, Stock Down. 4 more shows for you this week on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks as always for making us your first listen and watch each and every day. That'll do it though for the post-game show. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off as always. Thanks so much for watching, listening, downloading, and as always, let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.